So picture this. You are sitting in a high-stakes project review.
Oh, I know this scenario.
Right. You are maybe presenting to the board, and suddenly a senior colleague just totally loses it.
Yeah.
I mean, their voice raises, they get incredibly defensive, they start stonewalling the progress, and they're projecting blame onto literally everyone else in the room. It's a full-blown corporate meltdown.
The tension in that room is always just palpable. And the standard response from, well, almost anyone caught in the blast radius is to just throw more data at the problem.
Exactly.
We try to argue the facts, pointing to spreadsheets or contracts, basically hoping logic will just win the day.
Which, let's be honest, almost never works.
Yeah.
So today, our mission on this deep dive is exploring how to navigate those exact high-stakes corporate meltdowns. But we are looking at a completely unexpected source to figure out how to do it.
Yes, and the material we have today is fascinating.
It really is. We've got a stack of articles on corporate leadership, a series of incredibly detailed neurological diagrams, and insights drawn from a book called No Drama Discipline by Daniel J. Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson.
And looking at all this together, you arrive at this wild core realization right out of the gate.
Which is that we never actually outgrow our tantrums.
Right.
We really don't. We just give them corporate titles.
It fundamentally shifts your perspective once you see the data. I mean, when you look at the neurological research across these sources, the brain of a 5-year-old child under immense stress is operating identically to an adult's brain under intense professional pressure.
That is just crazy to think about.
But the underlying mechanics, they do not change simply because you are, wearing a suit and have a mortgage.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if an adult throwing a tantrum over a supply chain bottleneck is, like, neurologically identical to a toddler losing their mind in a grocery store, that completely upends how we need to handle workplace communication.
It really does.
So walk us through this interpersonal neurobiology. Like, why do our usual tactic-citing company policy or presenting clear-cut logic, why do they fail so spectacularly in those heated moments?
Well, to understand why adult tantrums happen in the boardroom, we first have to understand the literal architecture of the human brain under pressure.
Okay.
The sources present this as a 2-story neurological divide. So imagine the human brain as a 2-story house.
A 2-story house. Got it.
On the ground floor, you have what we call the downstairs brain. Mechanically, this consists of your amygdala and your brainstem.
Which are the older parts of the brain, right?
Exactly. It is primitive, it is highly reactive, and it is entirely driven by primal survival instincts. Your classic fight, flight, or freeze responses.
You know that feeling when an email comes in at 4:55 p.m. on a Friday, completely undoing a week of your work?
Oh, the worst feeling.
Your chest immediately tightens, your heart rate spikes, your vision practically narrows. I mean, that is the downstairs brain physically hijacking your nervous system.
Spot on. That physical sensation is your amygdala acting as a neurological smoke detector. It senses a threat, and it just floods your body with stress hormones. Like cortisol and adrenaline.
Wow.
And when this downstairs brain is online and driving the system, it produces massive defensive reactions and incredibly strong emotions. In a corporate setting, this doesn't look like running from a literal tiger.
Right, obviously.
It looks like shouting in meetings, or aggressively digging your heels in over minor details, or just spiraling into a visible anxious panic loop.
And when someone is in that state, their system has essentially failed, hasn't it?
Yes. The diagnostic matrix in our notes actually labels this as an offline system failure. Rational processing is entirely inaccessible to them at that moment.
So contrast that with the second floor of the house, the upstairs brain. I mean, this is the cerebral cortex. This is where the actual magic happens. Logic, decision-making, long-term planning, self-regulation, empathy, all of that.
Yes, when the upstairs brain is online, you see strategic planning and collaborative problem solving. But the critical takeaway from the diagrams is that when the downstairs brain detects a severe threat, like a blown deadline or, a perceived attack on someone's professional competence, the stairs between the 2 floors are completely blocked.
Wait, completely blocked?
Completely. The upstairs brain disconnects. The blood flow literally shifts away from the prefrontal cortex to prioritize the deeper survival centers of the brain.
Oh, wow.
You cannot access higher order thinking because the biological hardware essentially refuses to power it.
Which means trying to reason with them in that moment is like trying to reason with the driver of a runaway train by showing them the train's user manual?
That is a perfect way to put it.
You have to apply the brakes before they can read the instructions.
Oh.
I'm really looking at one of the diagrams from the sources right now, and it illustrates this mechanism perfectly. It's called the broken circuit. You have the manager node trying to send raw data, policy, and contractual obligations over to the employee node. But the employee is in that offline downstairs state.
Right. Their upstairs brain is dark.
And the data arrow literally shatters against a glowing defensive shield, causing a transmission failure. Presenting data to a panicked colleague isn't just ineffective. It creates extreme resistance.
What's fascinating here is that we constantly treat communication breakdowns in business as technical or logic problems.
We really do.
We operate under this assumption that if we just explain the spreadsheet better or clarify the timeline, the other person will calm down. But they aren't technical problems.
They're biological.
Yes, they are neurological regulatory problems.
Mm.
You were trying to speak to the CEO of their brain, but the CEO has left the building and the security guard is at the front desk panicking.
That is such a profound distinction. I mean, we were trying to solve a biological regulatory issue with a logic tool. It's like installing a software update while the computer is literally on fire. So if throwing facts and spreadsheets at a triggered colleague only accelerates the conflict and solidifies that defensive shield, how do we actually get their logical upstairs brain back online?
Well, that brings us to the foundational rule of this entire framework, which the sources call the Universal Treatment Protocol.
Okay.
Connect before you redirect. If you want to influence or collaborate with an adult in a reactive state, you must first stabilize their nervous system before you appeal to their logic.
Connection has to precede instruction.
Always.
Connect before you redirect. I mean, it sounds straightforward, but in the heat of a high-stakes moment, that requires a lot of discipline.
It takes immense practice.
And the sources lay out 3 principles of connection to get us from a state of conflict to a state of relational safety, lowering those defensive shields.
Yes. Principle 1 is to turn down the volume. When someone is highly activated, their emotional energy is erratic and intense. You have to match that high energy with a calm, low, and steady vocal tone.
And this is deeply tied to the function of mirror neurons in the brain, right?
Exactly.
Because mirror neurons are those biological copycats. They are designed to constantly scan our environment and read the intentions of others to gauge if we are safe.
They do exactly that. So if an agitated colleague raises their voice, and you raise your voice to match their volume or intensity, your mirror neurons are signaling a mutual threat.
Ah. So you're basically validating their panic by showing them you are panicking too.
Right, which just accelerates the conflict. One of the schematics in our notes specifically illustrates this as flattening a chaotic wave. You intentionally use your own regulated low-frequency vocal energy to systematically flatten their panic loop.
Oh, I love that imagery, flattening the wave. So once you stabilize the energy in the room, you move to principle 2. Validate, don't agree.
This one is vital.
It is, because people often assume that if you validate someone's freakout, you are implicitly agreeing that their reaction is justified or that they are right.
And that assumption causes leaders to avoid empathy entirely. But you do not have to concede your operational stance to validate an emotion. The emotional experience they're having is biologically real to them, even if their behavioral output is irrational or unprofessional. The sources provide a highly specific script for this phase.
Let me hear it.
It's simply, I see how incredibly stressful this timeline shift is for your team.
The genius of that script is what it doesn't do. I mean, it doesn't say, you're right, the timeline shift is a disaster and leadership is wrong.
No, not at all.
It simply acknowledges the human pressure point, the stress. And there's an actual neurological mechanism behind why this works called name it to tame it.
Yeah.
When you articulate the specific emotion, when you assign language to the feeling of stress or frustration, it literally forces the brain to route blood flow back from the reactive amygdala into the language centers in the prefrontal cortex.
It's amazing.
You are mechanically forcing the upstairs brain to begin waking up just by naming the emotion.
Acknowledging the emotion acts as a manual override, and that flows directly into principle 3. Listen to the why.
So looking past the surface level.
Exactly. You have to look past the explicit behavioral output, the angry email, the stubborn resistance in the meeting, to find the actual mechanical driver of the panic.
Because the underlying trigger usually isn't about the specific spreadsheet or the minor policy change. It's a deeper fear of failure, a sudden loss of control, or maybe profound hidden exhaustion.
That's almost always the case.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the sources give us a real-world scenario of this protocol put to the test during a massive high-stakes timeline escalation.
Right, yeah, I remember this.
A team lead was deeply defensive, visibly anxious, and projecting blame everywhere across the project landscape.
A textbook downstairs brain hijack.
Totally. The author of the article notes that their immediate baseline instinct, the instinct of a trained engineer, by the way, was an immediate redirect.
Naturally.
I wanted to present the raw data, clarify the contractual obligations, and enforce absolute accountability right on the spot. But according to the panic loop flowchart in the diagrams, taking route A, that direct logical engagement, just amplifies the threat response.
Because the engineer is trying to force analytical data through a heavily fortified defensive shield, the sympathetic nervous system, which acts as the body's accelerator pedal for stress, just flares up even further.
Right.
Logic remains entirely offline, and the interaction devolves into a resistance loop of escalated conflict and mutual stonewalling.
But instead, the engineer took route B, strategic empathy. They connected first.
Yeah.
The manager validated the human pressure point using that exact approach we just broke down. They said, I completely understand the immense pressure you are under right now. This bottleneck is highly frustrating, and it puts an unfair burden on your team.
And neurologically, this is where the magic shift occurs. The moment they feel seen and relationally safe, the threat response lowers.
The shield comes down.
Exactly. The parasympathetic nervous system engages. This system acts as the biological brake pedal. Through the vagus nerve, it physically slows the heart rate down, deepens the breathing, and halts the flood of cortisol. The defensiveness essentially evaporates because the body no longer believes it is under attack.
And once that biological threat response drops, the stairs clear. Executive function comes back online.
Precisely.
But obviously, you can't just sit there in a state of warm empathy forever. I mean, you have a business to run. Milestones still exist.
Right, you can't just pause the company.
Exactly. So how do you transition from that moment of connection back to solving the actual problem without triggering their downstairs brain all over again?
Well, this is where the framework introduces the 1-2-3 redirection staircase. It is a structured pathway to restore full executive function and move back into operational mode.
Okay, let's go step by step.
Step 1 is insight. You help them look inward with a targeted, non-threatening question. The script provided here is, what part of the new workflow is causing the biggest bottleneck for you?
So you're prompting them to use their analytical brain to identify the friction point rather than just emoting about it.
Yes. Then, step 2 is empathy, but in a different context than before. Here, it means guiding them to see the wider impact of the situation on the surrounding environment.
Oh, gotcha.
The script moves to, when communication breaks down like this, it stalls the entire workshop floor.
Okay, I have to be honest here. When I was reading this specific part of the source material, I genuinely struggled. And I can hear you, the listener, probably pushing back on this too.
Oh, for sure.
Because connect before you redirect sounds wonderful in a therapy session.
Yeah.
But in a boardroom with millions of dollars on the line or facing severe operational failures, it feels dangerously permissive.
It does feel that way to a lot of people.
How is this not just letting bad behavior slide? I mean, how do we avoid becoming pushover managers who let people throw tantrums as long as they feel heard?
That is the most common critique of high empathy leadership, but it fundamentally misunderstands what discipline actually is.
Okay.
The true linguistic root of the word discipline is to teach. It is not to penalize, shame, or punish. Optimal discipline requires incredibly firm structure. And to resolve this, the sources introduce a concept called the boundary equation.
The boundary equation. Let's break that down.
The equation states that validation of emotion plus correction of behavior equals optimal discipline. In high-level executive leadership, high empathy and titanium boundaries are not mutually exclusive concepts. In fact, they are structurally codependent. You need both pillars holding up the bridge, or the entire interaction collapses.
And the sources provide a specific script for this equation that perfectly illustrates how you can be highly empathetic while maintaining an absolute boundary.
Yes, they do.
The manager says, I understand you are facing immense pressure with this deployment. That is the validation of emotion. And it is unacceptable to speak to the project coordinators in that manner. That is the correction of behavior.
The semantic choice of the word AND is the linchpin of that script. It is very deliberately not the word BUT.
Wait, really? Just changing one word?
Yes. Saying, I understand you are stressed, but it is unacceptable, immediately deletes whatever empathy came before it. The word but is a verbal eraser.
A verbal eraser. I love that.
The word AND allows both truths to exist simultaneously in the room. You are dealing with immense stress, And D, you must maintain professional conduct. The boundary remains absolute, yet the delivery remains deeply humane.
It is treating the person with dignity while completely rejecting the unprofessional behavior.
Exactly.
And once that boundary is set and the behavior is corrected, we finally reach step 3 of the redirection staircase: repair and integration.
Yes, the final step.
This is where you finalize the transition back to the upstairs brain by focusing entirely on forward-looking solutions rather than past blame. The script for this final step is, let's co-create a structural adjustment today to protect the delivery timeline moving forward.
Co-creation is vital there. By asking them to help build the solution, you are fully integrating their logical capabilities back into the workflow. You have successfully guided them all the way back up the stairs.
We've talked about this largely from the perspective of a manager calming down a subordinate employee. But what happens when the person throwing the tantrum is your boss or your biggest client?
Oh, it happens all the time.
Right. What becomes vividly clear when you analyze these materials is that this framework isn't just some neat management trick. It is a universal, omnidirectional architectural tool for all human relationships.
It scales across every single quadrant of a business because the human nervous system is identical in all of them.
Yeah.
The sources map this out beautifully. We've just covered managing down, reassuring a team, and rebuilding trust before initiating structural audits after an operational failure. But it applies just as effectively to managing up.
Dealing with anxious leadership.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine a panicked executive demanding immediate answers because a metric dropped by 2%.
We've all been there.
The instinct is to drown them in immediate data to prove everything is fine.
But applying this framework means validating their urgency first.
Right.
Acknowledging their need for security de-escalates their downstairs brain so they can actually process the numbers you're trying to present.
And it works for managing out, too, dealing with difficult clients.
Oh, definitely.
The sources use this incredible term, mindsight. It is the ability to look past a client's aggressive language or seemingly unreasonable demands to pinpoint their core driving anxiety.
Right.
When a client is screaming over the phone about a minor aesthetic detail on a project, like a font size or a specific shade of blue, they usually aren't actually mad about the font.
No, almost never.
They are terrified that the overall project is going to fail, which will make them look incompetent to their own stakeholders. Mindsight allows you to connect with that underlying fear of failure rather than getting into a petty fight over the font.
That's it, exactly. But perhaps the most difficult application of all, though, is managing in. Applying this entire interpersonal framework to yourself.
Self-management. Treating your own internal downstairs brain moments with structured self-compassion. The sources highlight a highly specific biological technique for this during aggressive negotiations or stressful moments. The 90-second physiological pause.
This is crucial. When you feel yourself getting triggered, when you feel that chest tightening and that flush of heat, it takes the human body approximately 90 seconds to process and clear those stress chemicals out of the bloodstream.
Just 90 seconds.
Yeah. The adrenaline and cortisol need a minute and a half to flush through the system.
So if you can just force yourself to pause for 90 seconds, you allow the chemical waves to pass, you prevent your own downstairs brain from hijacking your mouth, keeping your own executive function online. I mean, it is the ultimate form of self-discipline.
And this framework extends far beyond the confines of the boardroom, too. The sources include a deeply personal application regarding elder care, applying this high-empathy, connect-first approach with aging parents.
That part was really moving. When you're trying to manage the complex logistics of an elderly parent's life, it's incredibly easy to treat it like a clinical checklist. Take this medication, sign these medical forms, move to this facility.
Right, because we are stressed and just want to fix it.
But when they stubbornly resist your help, it isn't because they are trying to be difficult or obstinate. It is because their underlying, unspoken fear is the profound loss of their own autonomy.
It is the exact same mechanism as an adult resisting a workflow transition in the corporate office, or a child fighting a transition at bedtime.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that underlying friction, first connecting deeply with the fear of losing control, changes the entire dynamic of the relationship.
It is incredibly powerful when you realize it is all running on the exact same biological hardware. So what does this all mean for you navigating your own high-stakes environments?
That's the big question.
It means that emotional intelligence is not some fluffy, soft skill.
Yeah.
It is the literal structural engineering of human relationships.
Oh.
Before you try to fix the spreadsheet, before you try to cite company policy or lay out a clinical checklist, you have to validate the human pressure point.
Yes.
You have to biologically stabilize the nervous system. Connect first. the logic will follow.
As we wrap up this exploration, this raises an important question to take with you today. We have established that under extreme stress, our adult brains perfectly mimic the neurobiological state of a 5-year-old child. If we truly internalize that reality, how might recognizing our own internal downstairs brain moments change the way we design the pacing of our daily schedules?
Mhm.
Or, more importantly, how might it fundamentally change the tone of voice we use to speak to ourselves when we inevitably make a mistake?
A brilliant question to leave you with. The next time you feel that panic loop starting, remember the two-story house. Take a 90-second breath, let the chemicals clear, and help yourself back upstairs. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of the mind. Keep learning, keep exploring, and we'll catch you next time.